Have you ever woken from a dream and their presence still lingered like fog in your chest? Even though time has passed, even though logic tells you it's over, they return, night after night, as if some part of the story remains unwritten. This is not a coincidence. This is not just memory. This is a dialogue between your soul and what was left unresolved. Carl Jung called it the autonomous complex, a psychic fragment with a life of its own, formed by deep emotional bonds never fully integrated. What we try to silence in waking life often finds a way to speak in dreams. Joe Dispenza reminds us, every emotional memory that carries a charge becomes biologically alive. Your nervous system remembers. Your dreams remember. And the soul doesn't ask questions with words. It speaks through symbols, echoes, and unfinished gestures. It speaks through the image of that person who left, but never really disappeared. So, if they've returned again in your dreams, maybe it's not because you're stuck in the past. Maybe your soul is asking something it never dared to ask when you were awake. Now let's walk through this inner landscape, not to seek them, but to understand what part of you is still whispering their name. There are partings that happen only on the surface. The body walks away, the words say goodbye, life resumes its pace. But something inside remains suspended, like a page left open mid-sentence, like a door that never fully closed. Dreams become the soul's way of reopening what consciousness tried to seal shut. Jung once wrote that the unconscious compensates what the ego avoids. And perhaps this is why they return, not to disturb you, but to complete something left undone. You believed the chapter was closed. Yet in the silence of the night they sit beside you again. In a hallway, a beach, a look, as if your soul insists on one last conversation. It's not about going back to them. It's about recognizing that your inner world is still trying to find coherence with the energy they once awakened in you. Joe Dispenza reminds us that emotional experiences, especially intense ones, imprint themselves in the nervous system. And they don't just vanish because the mind wills them to. They become energetic residues echoing in our dreams, calling for closure, clarity, or release. You are not dreaming because you miss them. You are dreaming because something between you two was never fully felt, named, or integrated. The soul continues what the words interrupted. It replays the fragments not for punishment, but for reconciliation. There is a kind of silence that does not come from peace, but from emotional anesthesia. So often, let it go is whispered like a spell, as if repeating it enough times could dissolve the ache. But what if letting go too soon becomes another way to abandon what needed to be heard? Some wounds do not ask to be released. They ask to be recognized. When you dream of someone who is no longer present, it may not be a sign that you're stuck. It may be a sign that your soul is still weaving meaning from the threads they left behind. Joe Dispenza teaches us that the emotional charge of a memory is what keeps it neurologically alive. If the bond held intensity, if the love was half-lived, if the goodbye was swallowed, then the body stores what the mind cannot digest. Trying to silence these dreams is like trying to mute the sacred questions of your own becoming. Let it go, when spoken too soon, can act as a spiritual bypass, a premature burial of what still breathes in symbols and metaphors. Jung would remind us, the psyche does not operate on timelines. The soul does not forget because the calendar insists it should. To truly let go, one must first let in. Let in the dream, the ache, the unresolved dialogue that echoes not to torment, but to complete what was interrupted. There are people who enter our lives not to stay, but to open something sacred within us. Maybe you weren't meant to walk this life beside them. Maybe they were only the threshold. A dream figure is not always a memory. Sometimes it is an archetype, cloaked in a familiar face. Jung called these inner images living symbols, parts of our psyche that take form to show us who we're becoming. Perhaps it wasn't him your soul keeps calling for. Perhaps it was the version of yourself that awakened when you loved him, the one who dared to feel fully, to hope deeply, to surrender without armor. Maybe that love was never about possession. Maybe it was initiation. Joe Dispenza teaches that every powerful emotional experience becomes a biochemical message, a signature in our being. When a dream brings him back, it may be reviving that message, not the man. Ask not only, why do I still dream of him? But, who was I becoming in his presence? Sometimes the dream is not about reunion. It is about remembrance. It is about reclaiming the fragment of soul that bloomed and then was left behind. And so, the figure in the dream is not the destination. He is the door. Some dreams return not as gentle whispers, but as persistent echoes. When the silent questions the soul brings are ignored or pushed aside, they do not vanish. They gather weight and intensity, like waves that grow louder against a shore refusing to listen. Symbols once tender can twist into shadows, nightmares that shake the quiet of the night. This is not punishment, but insistence. The psyche's way of saying, I am still here, you have not heard me. Jung spoke of the psyche as a theater where the soul performs its unfinished plays. When emotions remain unclaimed, the script loops endlessly, demanding attention in liminal spaces where waking logic cannot reach. In the hush before sleep, if the dream repeats, it is calling for a meeting, a sacred conversation with the parts of yourself still bound to that other. Questions like, what fragment of this person still lives within me? What have I been afraid to name? A dream question journal becomes a silent altar, a space to invite these fragments to speak, not with words, but with images and feeling. The soul's language is never loud, but when unheard, it finds ways to insist like a river eroding stone, patient and relentless. There was a woman who dreamed of him, always weeping, always reaching out through tears she could not name. At first, she believed the dream was his silent call, his sorrow reaching across the distance to touch her heart. But as the nights unfolded, something shifted. Through the mirror of Jungian dreamwork, she glimpsed the deeper truth. The dream was not his grief, but hers. A sorrow buried beneath layers of silence, waiting for permission to breathe. His tears were the language of her own inner wound, a grief that had never found an outlet. In that dream, the soul was not asking for reunion, but for recognition, not for his pain, but for hers. She was invited to mourn not what was lost between them, but what was lost within herself. A grief untouched becomes a shadow, casting long shapes over waking life. Dreams do not always carry the voice of the other. Sometimes they carry the voice of the part of you still unheard. The sacredness of that night was the space given to her own silent mourning. Sometimes the person who visits our dreams is not who we believe them to be. Jung teaches that the shadow is the hidden, often denied part of ourselves, the aspects we have rejected or feared. When this shadow speaks, it often wears the mask of someone we know, someone familiar, to soften the edges of its message. The one who returns in dreams may not be a ghost of the past, but a mirror to the qualities within us that remain exiled, the freedom we have denied, the passion we have silenced, the longing we refuse to see. This visitor is not a messenger from the outside. It is an emissary from the depths of our own being. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, Jung warned. In the silent theater of dreams, this shadow dances with familiar faces, inviting recognition, integration, and healing. Who is this person as a symbol? Are they the flame of your forbidden desires, the voice of your unspoken truths, the call to reclaim what was lost? Dreams do not deceive. They speak in riddles, but always with the aim of returning us to ourselves. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. The body carries stories the mind no longer dares to tell. Joe Dispenza's work reveals how the nervous system is a reservoir of emotional memories, patterns that pulse beneath our waking awareness. Dreams arise not only from thoughts, but from these deep, energetic imprints, restless in the quiet of night. When a face returns in dreams, it may not be just a ghost of memory. It may be the nervous system's way of speaking a truth too raw for daylight. The emotional body remembers what the mind silenced. Like an echo in the corridors of your being, these dreams pulse with the unspoken, the unfinished. They are biochemical reverberations of a bond that has not yet loosened its hold. This is why some presences haunt not out of desire, but out of necessity. The soul's insistence that a chapter needs deeper hearing. And so, the dream becomes the place where body and soul meet to remember, to feel, to slowly untangle what waking life could not hold. The soul does not dream to torment, but to guide. When the same figure returns night after night, it is not a random visitor, it is a question waiting in the shadows. What truth has been too heavy to speak aloud? What part of yourself died the day they left, quietly, without ceremony? What wisdom lies buried beneath the pain that no one else sees? This recurring dream is not about the other. It is the sacred space where the soul performs its ritual of healing and transformation. Jung called dreams letters from the soul, each one folded in symbols and feelings we often rush to forget upon waking. Joe Dispenza reminds us that the emotional brain does not distinguish past from present. So these dreams are alive, pulsing, asking for attention. To listen is to accept that some questions are too profound for words and must be felt in the silence between the images. If they return, it is because a door inside you remains ajar, waiting to be crossed, not back to them, but into a deeper knowing of yourself. The dream does not summon you back to them, it calls you home to yourself. What lingers in those nightly visits is not their presence, but the echo of a bond unfinished. Emotional ties that resist closure become symbols, shadows dancing in the theater of your soul, inviting you to look beneath the surface. Jung said dreams are letters from the soul, fragile messages folded in silence, symbol and feeling. Joe Dispenza reminds us that the emotional brain carries the past as vividly as the present. So when you awaken from one more dream of them, it is not mere longing. It is a sacred question whispered through the veils of night. Will you finally listen to what this relationship awakened in you? The soul does not rush healing. It invites you into the slow, tender unfolding of truth. In this quiet space between sleep and waking, something waits to be remembered, the part of you that was bound, broken, and still beautiful. If you have traveled this far, know you are not alone in this silent dialogue. In the quiet corners of our shared human experience we meet, and here, in this shared silence, we find belonging. If you felt the call, the echo, the reflection, right below, Estoy despierta. Together we walk this sacred path of remembering. Until the next time, may your soul find the peace it seeks.